This grave is in the Timor Cemetery between Maryborough and Dunolly, Central Victoria. Florence married Charles Albans in 1923. Twice he was seriously wounded on the Western Front. Prior to the marriage she was a Macpherson. In 1920 Florence received a letter. How the letter reached her was a first for the Dunolly district. This was the Macpherson home, a farm on Middle Road between Betley and Eddington, a few kilometres south-east of Dunolly. It was called Laurie. This copy of a letter was written in England in 1919 by a young woman named Winnie Watling. The original is in a bank safe deposit. In 1919, these 4 men flying this First World War bomber won a prize of £10,000 by winning an air race from England to Australia. So, how do we connect 2 young women, an air race and a letter? Betley is a few kilometres south-east of Dunolly. Its origins are in the 1850s, including a bridge crossing the Betbed Creek. It was settled by people mainly from Scotland, including the Macphersons. The creek flats are still farmed, but the numerous prize-winning orchards are long gone. There was a bridge further upstream and one downstream. For obvious reasons, Betley became known as Middle Bridge. Mail often went to any other place with middle in the name, so eventually the name was changed back to Betley. Problem solved. In the period of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the town was very prosperous when it became the focus of large, deep gold mines. One result was a larger school built in 1907. The old school was overflowing with children. The opening celebrations featured performances from the children, including Florence Macpherson. Standing before the large audience, she gave a recitation titled My Funny Dream. In 1919, Australia's Prime Minister Billy Hughes announced a prize of £10,000 for whoever came first in an air race from England to Australia. It had to be done in less than 30 days and before the new year, and you had to be an Australian. Walter Henry Shears, Sir Keith Smith and his brother Sir Ross Smith, along with James Mallet Bennett, did the trip in just under 28 days, arriving in Darwin on December 10. The prize was divided evenly, which included the mechanics Walter and James. Walter Shears and Sir Keith Smith would both marry and were involved in aviation all their lives. James Bennett and Sir Ross Smith died in an air crash in 1922 while preparing for an around-the-world attempt, ironically near where their 1919 flight to Australia began. While researching a different topic, a museum member stumbled onto a distraction, a reproduction of a letter to Florence Ann Macpherson, a young woman who lived at an address simply given as Laurie, Betley. The letter was written by another young woman named Winnie Watling at the Vickers Works, adjacent to famous Brooklands motor racing track in England. The letter had come to Australia via the prize-winning aviators in the World War I Vickers Vimy. The flight was also carrying the first mail from England to Australia. We would learn that one letter was carried privately. It was also one of the few to have a proper postage stamp. After the plane arrived in Australia, Billy Hughes caused a commemorative stamp to be applied as shown in this Australia Post stamp. The Australian War Museum informs 364 were attached to letters before the defacing stamp was applied. Back in Dunolly, the newspaper editor inserted a lengthy preamble that reveals the significance of how the letter got to Australia. There was a slight problem about the defacing date, saying November, when it was actually, in fact, February. The newspaper article created many questions. Museum member Anne Doran lives in the area and knows the McPhersons. The result was a meeting with Ian McPherson and his wife Judy. The location of Laurie was learned and a copy of the letter obtained, which, curiously, is different to the newspaper version.
Probably very few Australians have had the distinction of having received letters by the first aerial mail between Great Britain and Australia. But that distinction is possessed by a young lady in this district, Miss Laurie McPherson, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. W. McPherson of Laurie, Betley. Miss McPherson had been in correspondence with a young English lady, letters having been exchanged during the war in connection, we think, with school matters. In any case, Miss McPherson's English correspondent, Miss Winnie Watling, had the opportunity of utilising the first aerial mail service between Britain and Australia, the success of which has so greatly interested not only the public of Australia, but the populations of every country in the world. The letter, in fact, was brought out with other mail matter by the famous aviator Sir Ross Smith, who with his brother and other companions so recently completed the air trip from England to Australia. The letter was delivered at the office of the Prime Minister of Australia and was sent from that office to Miss McPherson. The envelope in itself is a curiosity and will be valued, stamped as it is with the record First Aerial Mail, Great Britain to Australia, November 26th, with other details relating to the Vickers Vimy machine. The special stamp is unique and would be valued by collectors as comparatively few of them are in existence, and it is a memorial of a wonderful enterprise. On this splendid stamp is printed First Aerial Post and England, Australia, and between a sketch of the British Isles and Australia with a lighted torch in the centre and above it the representation of an aeroplane. The defacing stamp on the envelope and other marks all relate to the great undertaking. The young English correspondent of Miss McPherson occupies a responsible position in the Vickers Vimy office and thus was able to utilise this marvellous mail.
91 Guildford Street, Churnsey, Surrey, England, October 31st, 1919. Dear Florrie, as promised, I'm sending this letter by air. Quite a novel way, isn't it? I should say, by the time this letter is delivered to you, it will have passed over a good many interesting places. How I should love to be with it. It was in such a similar seat as that in which the carrier of this letter is sitting that I took my first flight. I think it was very kind of this Australian mechanic to offer to carry this letter, wasn't it? I sincerely hope that it will reach its destination safely. I think it stands a good chance if all the good wishes and luck which are being wished it can help. Wouldn't it be another great honour for these works, Vickers, if this machine really did win this great race? This machine is after the same type as that which flew the Atlantic, you know. It has got such a dinky little mascot on the top plane, made in brass. It is a little pilot with 2 joysticks, like a steering wheel with which they control the tail planes, in its hands and a propeller in front. I have had it in the office here with me all the morning, but I believe it has just been fixed on the machine, which they hope to start in by tomorrow. Well, goodbye once again. I can hear all the works people returning from lunch, and I suppose it is nearly time to commence work again. I thought perhaps you would like to be one of the first to receive your mail by air. Your loving English friend, Winnie Watling. P.S. Please remember me to Doug when you see him next.
The Laurie home is gone, but a newer home on the site proudly displays the name. Extensive inquiries have been made about the mascot mentioned by Winnie, the one fitted to the wing, but no result. The effects of the war did not stop on Armistice Day. All across Australia you will find monuments each revealing a terrible toll. This one is in the Betley Hall, but they don't tell the stories. For many, the war clouded the promise of a future, so life was often seized day by day. There is a Ferguson McFamily story handed down that quietly suggests a romance between Winnie, who stayed behind in England, and one of the mechanics who carried a letter halfway around the world to Australia.